It began with a body collapsed on a kitchen floor, surrounded by empty meal prep containers and half-drunk protein shakes. A 42-year-old man, once the face of keto transformation, now trembling from vitamin deficiencies and adrenal fatigue. Doctors said he was starving in abundance. His blood work painted a paradox: overflowing cholesterol, vanishing minerals. And as cameras zoom in on medal-winning influencers and best-selling books on intermittent fasting, paleo, carnivore, and the Mediterranean diet, one whisper cuts through the wellness noise. What if none of them actually work the way we think they do? Flashback to 1977. The U.S. Senate released its dietary goals for the nation, urging citizens to eat less fat and more carbohydrates. Newspaper headlines hailed it as a revolution. Low-fat everything flooded the shelves. But heart disease rates kept rising, obesity doubled, and diabetes exploded. Behind polished food pyramids and smiling breakfast ads, the truth began to fracture. Scientists warned that the data had holes, alternatives were suppressed, and funding flowed from cereal giants and sugar associations. A seed was planted, not just in our diets, but in our trust what if the guidelines themselves were wrong. By the 1990s, diet culture had become a battleground of ideologies and billion-dollar industries. Atkins re-emerged, flipping the low-fat narrative on its head with high-fat, low-carb promises. Weight Watchers tracked points with religious fervor. Then came the juice cleanses, the cabbage soup craze, and the South Beach solution. Each one arrived like gospel. Each one faded with scars of burnout and binging. But one diet endured not because it was perfect, but because it wore the lab coat of science, the Mediterranean diet. Olive oil, fish, red wine, whole grains. Praised by researchers, promoted by doctors, immortalized in Blue Zone documentaries. But buried in that praise lies a haunting question of, this diet is so perfect, why are so many still sick? Deep in Okinawa, nestled among secrets of extraordinary longevity, a quiet contradiction pulses beneath the surface. Elders, once sustained by sweet potatoes and seaweed, are now served microwave meals laced with preservatives and imported sugars. In Loma Linda, California, Seventh-day Adventists follow plant-based purity, yet type 2 diabetes quietly rises among later generations. Sardinian farmers, who once walked miles daily, are now commuting, inactive, and slowly slipping. These are the legendary blue zones, places where the Mediterranean diet supposedly thrives, but something has changed. As tradition meets modern marketing and global food systems reshape their plates, the core of the Mediterranean miracle begins to crumble. What if it wasn't the olive oil, the fish, or even the red wine that kept them alive, but what's now been lost forever? Turn now to the chaos of elimination. The carnivore diet strips everything away, down to meat, salt, and water, nothing else. Its followers report mental clarity, dissipation of autoimmune symptoms, even euphoria. But beneath that stark simplicity lurks biochemical roulette. A mother of 3 eliminated every grain, vegetable, and fruit, chasing remission from chronic fatigue. At first, it worked. Her fog lifted, her joints stopped aching. Then her hair began falling out. Her cholesterol soared. Her kidneys strained. Doctors argued, adaptive phase or warning sign? No one could agree. The studies were few, the risks mounting. And as celebrity adherents flaunted their ribeyes and raw liver online, a question festered in the background: what happens to a human body not in weeks, but in decades? When fiber, plants, and diversity vanish completely from the plate, enter intermittent fasting, the rhythm dieting by the clock instead of the plate. Skip breakfast, carve windows, stretch hunger into discipline. The initial results were undeniable. Blood glucose dipped, inflammation markers receded, brain fog lifted like morning mist. It felt primal, controlled starvation echoing the feast-famine cycles of evolution. But beneath the euphoria of personal victories, new studies exposed fractures. In women, hormone disruptions. In athletes, muscle degradation. For some, metabolic improvements were sharp and brief, then slid backwards. One researcher called it a pendulum diets, winging wildly between promise and peril. And as millions downloaded fasting apps and watched timers tick like sacred ritual, scientists warned, we may be tampering with ancient biological clocks we barely understand. What if it's not when we eat, but what eats away at us during the silence? From the ashes of failed fasts and protein-packed extremes, a gentler promise emerged, plant-based, built on empathy, longevity, and environmental urgency. It gained devotees from labs to Hollywood. Documentaries like What the Health and Forks Over Knives catalyzed a movement. Tofu, tempeh, and almond milk became cultural staples. Cardiovascular risk nosedived in studies. Cancer odds narrowed, and energy levels surged for some. But beneath the kale, smoothies, and quinoa bowls lurked nutritional fragility. Deficiencies in B12, iron, omega-3s surfaced slowly, silently. A teenage athlete collapsed mid-run, later diagnosed with anemia from an aggressive vegan protocol. Her gut was clean, but her body was starving for balance. Some whisper of big soy, of processed plant products flooding the shelves in greenwashed disguises. Is the plant-based promise real, or are we replacing one industrial trap with another just painted in chlorophyll? In the shadows of brightly lit health claims stands the silent giant ultra-processed diet culture. Not a diet in theory, but in practice, it consumes the modern plate. Keto ice cream with 10 ingredients, gluten-free chips laced with seed oils, protein bars birthed in labs. Wherever diets go, the food industry follows, packaging restriction in seductive wrappers. A study in cell metabolism revealed the cost. Participants unknowingly ate 500 more calories per day on processed foods compared to whole. Obesity isn't just about willpower, but engineering textures, flavors, shelf life, addiction. One food scientist admitted anonymously, "We design foods to be eaten mindlessly." So maybe it's not about keto versus paleo, fasting versus feeding, meat versus plant. Maybe the real question is this: can any diet succeed if it's built on a system designed to make us fail? Behind every trending diet lies the echo of something older than books or influencers, older than nutrition labels and superfoods. It is the memory of hunger, of survival, of trust in the body's whisper rather than market's roar. Before keto macros and Mediterranean pyramids, people ate with rhythm and instinct, guided by seasons, rituals, and scarcity. Today, we have abundance but no clarity, choice but no compass. Each diet claims to be the answer, but perhaps there was never just one path, only fragments of truth, buried beneath marketing and misunderstanding. In the final analysis, the question has never been, which diet works best? The question is, which truth are we willing to believe, and at what cost to our bodies, our minds, and the very meaning of nourishment itself? Now, in sterile labs and silent clinics, a quiet rebellion stirs. Scientists revisit forgotten foods, ancestral microbes, and fermented fibers long dismissed by modern diets. In Finland, rye bread laced with wild cultures shows promise for gut healing. In sub-Saharan communities untouched by industrialized eating, microbiomes bloom with diversity unseen in the West. These aren't trends, they're time machines, pulling us backward to move forward. And as nutritional science grapples with contradictions and context, the future may not lie in the next trending protocol, but in reconnection with ecosystems, with ancestral wisdom, and with the body's ancient dialogue. The truth is not in the diet, it's in the disconnect. Until we heal that fracture, no food, however sacred, will truly save us. In the end, every popular diet, whether cloaked in science, morality, nostalgia, or rebellionis, a reflection of something deeper, a hunger not just for health, but for meaning. The diets we choose mirror our fears, our hopes, and the stories we inherit about what it means to thrive. No plan, no protocol, no perfect ratio can override the chaos of a disconnected culture. What works is never just the food, it's the rhythm, the rest, the environment, the belief. The ultimate nourishment might not be found in macros, but in reclaiming agency over the table, over the noise, and over the body's forgotten wisdom. Until we stop chasing labels and start listening, not even the most perfect diet on paper will work in practice. The search ends not with answers, but with an invitation to remember what we once knew, and to eat like life depends on it, because it does. Somewhere between the clinical trials and the chaotic grocery aisles lies an inconvenient truth: nutrition is not just a science, but a story. Each food choice we make carries a memory, a habit, a belief passed down or sold to us. And when these stories clash between body and brand, culture and commerce, the result is confusion masquerading as guidance. Behind every label promising purity is a boardroom crunching numbers. Behind every food trend is a moment of fear, loss, or longing. We are not just what we eat, we are what we're told to eat, shamed for wanting, praised for avoiding. And until we confront the emotional roots of dieting, the shame, the control, the false promises, no truth will fully nourish us. Because the real diet we need is one that feeds both body and soul, without punishment, without profit, and without forgetting that food is, and has always been, more than fuel. It is memory, power, ritual, and when we honor that, healing becomes possible not just in the body, but in the story we choose to tell next. The diets will evolve, and the data will shift, but the danger lies not in choosing wrongly, but in forgetting the human beneath the hype. She stands in line after a 12-hour shift, overwhelmed, ashamed, reaching for a frozen meal that promises low-carb salvation. He scrolls late into the night, desperate for answers his body forgot how to trust. In the noise of expert panels and influencer reels, the simplest truth gets drowned. Food is emotional, sacred, personal. No one-size-fits-all doctrine will ever solve a question that begins in the human heart. So if there's one thread that binds every popular diet, from carnivore to raw vegan, from fasting to feasting, it's not biology. It's the yearning beneath, to heal, to hope, to be whole. And maybe, just maybe, the only diet that works is the one that finally lets us feel human again. So we return, full circle, not to a miracle meal or a macro ratio, but to a moment quiet, ordinary, often overlooked, where someone chooses to cook again, not for fuel, but for connection, where the dopamine of diets fades, and what remains is the simplicity of a shared table, passed down recipe, a meal slow enough to taste. In that moment, there are no influencers, no charts, no countdowns, only the body remembering how to listen, how to feel, how to belong. If there is any wisdom left after all the experiments and extremes, it is this: the only diet that works is the one that leads us not further into control, but back to care. Because in the end, the science will evolve, the fads will fade, but the act of nourishing the real human kindness never required perfection, only presence. Because presence is the truth every diet forgets. Not a presence counted in macros or measured in steps, but in the gentle awareness of what it means to truly feed ourselves without deception, without performance. It's the grandmother humming while chopping garlic, the friend quietly offering soup after loss, the child learning the warmth of a home-cooked meal. These moments carry no labels, no agendas, yet they nourish in ways clinical trials never could. So as the last trend fades and the next one waits in the wings, perhaps the most radical choice left is this: not to follow, but to feel. Not to perfect the plan, but to return to the plate with reverence, to eat not just for life, but with it. And in doing so, to finally remember the one truth buried beneath every diet we've ever believed. Food is not the answer. It is the question asked every day, at every table. And how we answer, with presence, will define not just our health, but our humanity. And that question, in the end, is not scientific, not even nutritional, it is existential. What do we hunger for when we choose kale over cake? When we count instead of connect? Every popular diet is a mirror held up to a society lost in its reflection. And maybe healing doesn't begin with rules, but with remembrance of the body that once knew, of the hunger that once guided, not frightened. So the next time a diet promises salvation, pause, not in skepticism, but in stillness. Ask not, will this work? What have I forgotten to feel? Because only there, in that quiet reckoning, do we begin the real journey, not of losing weight, but of lifting the weight of disconnection. And maybe that is the only transformation that ever truly works.